The first morning I could climb the stairs without help, I found a stack of papers on the kitchen counter that didn't belong to me. My name wasn't on them. My address was. My daughter's signature sat at the bottom where mine should have been. The coffee maker hissed the way it always did at 6:47. The floorboards creaked beneath my slippers. The third one from the doorway, the one I'd been meaning to fix for 8 years. Everything sounded like it always had. The light through the kitchen window fell at the same angle it had every October morning since 1987. But the document in my hand said this house had stopped being mine 3 months ago, on a Tuesday I'd spent in bed recovering from surgery, unable to drive, unable to walk to the mailbox, unable to do anything but trust the person I'd raised. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I set the paper down and made toast because that's what I did every morning. And some part of me believed that if I kept the routine intact, reality might correct itself. This isn't fiction. This is how betrayal arrives. Not with violence, but with paperwork you were never meant to see. Before the surgery, I'd been tired for months. The kind of tired that settles into your bones and makes every decision feel like lifting furniture. My hip had been deteriorating for 2 years, bone grinding against bone, until even standing at the stove became a negotiation with pain. The doctor said the recovery would take 12 weeks minimum. No driving, no stairs for the first month, no lifting anything heavier than a gallon of milk. My daughter offered before I could ask. "I'll take care of everything, Mom. Bills, groceries, whatever you need. You just focus on healing." She said it standing in my kitchen, her hand on my shoulder, her voice steady and warm. She'd always been the responsible one, the first to remember birthdays, the one who called every Sunday, the daughter who showed up. When her sister moved to Portland and stopped answering texts, Emma stayed. When her father died and left me with a mortgage I didn't understand, Emma helped me refinance. She had her own life, her own job managing accounts at a commercial real estate firm, but she made space for me in it without complaint. So when she suggested I add her name to the bank account temporarily, just so she could pay bills while I recovered, it felt like kindness. It felt like what family does. I signed the forms at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon in late June. The house smelled like lemon furniture polish. The ceiling fan turned lazy circles above us. She made me tea afterward, and we watched a cooking show neither of us cared about. I remember thinking how lucky I was to have her, how some mothers never get this kind of care. The surgery was scheduled for July 9th. I went under at 7 in the morning and woke at noon to a nurse telling me everything had gone perfectly. Emma was there when they wheeled me into recovery, holding my purse and a stuffed elephant she'd bought at the hospital gift shop because she said I needed something soft to hold when I laughed so the incisions wouldn't hurt as much. For the first 3 weeks, I lived in a hospital bed they'd set up in the living room. Emma came every day. She brought groceries. She sorted mail. She drove me to physical therapy appointments and waited in the car, reading a novel with a broken spine. She refilled my prescriptions. She made soup. She answered the phone when I was too tired to speak. I never saw the bills. She said she'd handle them, and she did. I didn't know then that handling them meant something I hadn't agreed to. By mid-September, I could walk without the cane. By early October, I could manage the stairs, slowly, one step at a time, gripping the railing. The physical therapist said I was ahead of schedule. My body had done the work. My house felt smaller than it had before, like I'd been gone longer than 3 months, like I was returning to a place that had quietly rearranged itself while I slept. Emma's visits had tapered. She still called, still came by once a week with takeout and updates about work. But something in her voice had changed. She answered questions before I finished asking them. She checked her phone more. When I mentioned that I hadn't seen any bank statements in a while, she said everything was fine, that she'd been handling it digitally to save paper. I believed her because I'd never had a reason not to. The papers appeared the morning after she'd been by for dinner. We'd eaten pasta at the kitchen table and talked about nothing important. Her coworker's baby shower, a recipe she wanted to try, whether I should replace the water heater before winter. She left a little after 8, kissing my cheek at the door the way she always did. I found the documents the next morning, half hidden beneath a grocery store circular. At first I thought they were just refinancing offers, the kind that show up every few months promising lower rates. But the letterhead was from a title company, and the date was July 23rd, 2 weeks after my surgery, when I'd been sleeping 16 hours a day and couldn't remember my own phone number through the haze of painkillers. The deed transfer was clean, legal, notarized. My signature looked close enough. Not perfect, but close enough that someone who wasn't me might believe it was real. The house had been signed over to her. Fully, completely. My name removed. Hers added. Ownership transferred for the sum of $1 and natural love and affection. I stood at the counter reading the same paragraph over and over, the way you read something that doesn't translate, that exists in a language you thought you spoke but suddenly can't comprehend. The third time through, my hands started shaking. Not from fear, from recognition. Because somewhere beneath the shock, I already knew this was real. I didn't call her right away. I made coffee. I sat at the table. I looked around the kitchen I'd painted 16 years ago, the counters I'd chosen, the cabinets my husband had installed himself the summer before he got sick. I thought about the bedroom upstairs, where I'd slept for 38 years, the garden I'd planted, the fence I'd repaired, the roof I'd replaced after the ice storm in 2014. I thought about how I'd worked 2 jobs to keep this house when the bank wanted to foreclose, how I'd scrubbed floors at the high school in the evenings because the pay was better than I could find anywhere else, and the insurance covered my kids, how I'd chosen this place over vacations, over a newer car, over anything that felt temporary. This house was the only thing I owned that couldn't be taken unless I let it go. And I'd let it go, on paper. Somewhere in the fog of recovery, between medications and exhaustion, I'd signed something I didn't understand, or I hadn't signed anything at all, and someone had signed for me. I called her at 9:15. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and distracted. I could hear traffic in the background, the muffled sound of a car radio. Hey, Mom, what's up? I need you to come over. I'm on my way to work. Can it wait until tonight? No. Something in my voice made her pause. Is everything okay? I looked at the papers spread across the table. I need you to come over now. She arrived 40 minutes later. I heard her car in the driveway, the slam of the door, her footsteps on the porch. She used her key to let herself in, the way she had 100 times before. She called out my name the way she always did, casual and easy, like this was just another visit. I was still sitting at the table. I hadn't moved. She stopped in the doorway, saw the papers. Her face did something I'd never seen before. Not surprise, not guilt, not fear, just stillness, like a door closing. Mom, sit down. She didn't. She stood in the doorway with her purse still on her shoulder, her keys in her hand. I can explain. Explain what? That you stole my house? I didn't steal anything. I protected it. Her voice was calm, reasonable. The same voice she'd used to convince me to add her to the bank account. The same voice she'd used when she said she'd handle everything. Protected it from what? From you losing it. You were behind on the mortgage, Mom. You hadn't made a payment in 4 months. That's not true. It is true. I saw the statements. You were going to lose it? I did what I had to do. I stared at her. You forged my signature. I had power of attorney. No, you didn't. I needed it. You were incapacitated. Someone had to make decisions. So you decided to take my house. I saved it. The bank was going to foreclose. I paid off what you owed. I took over the mortgage. You get to stay here. Nothing has to change. Everything has changed. She looked at me the way you look at a child who doesn't understand something simple. You're being dramatic. You still live here. You're still safe. I just made sure it wouldn't get taken away. You took it away. I secured it by putting it in your name. Because you couldn't handle it anymore. Her words hung in the air between us. Clean, final, true in a way I didn't want to admit. I thought about the months before the surgery, the bills I'd let pile up because I was too tired to open them, the phone calls from the mortgage company I'd stopped answering, the late payment notices I'd shoved into a drawer because looking at them made my chest hurt. I'd been drowning slowly, and I'd convinced myself I was just treading water. But I hadn't asked her to save me. Not like this. You should have told me. I did tell you. You don't remember. You were on so many painkillers, Mom. You barely knew what day it was. I would have remembered signing my house away. Would you? The question landed like a stone. Because the truth was, I didn't know. There were whole weeks after the surgery that existed only in fragments. A conversation I couldn't place, a meal I didn't remember eating, a television show I apparently watched but had no memory of. The medications had turned time into something liquid and unreliable, and she'd known that. "Get out," she blinked. "What?" "Get out of my house." "Mom, be reasonable. It's not your house yet. Get out." She stood there for another moment, her keys still in her hand, her face unreadable, then she turned and walked out. She didn't slam the door. She closed it softly, the way you close the door to a room where someone is sleeping. I sat at the table until the coffee went cold. The house was silent, except for the refrigerator's hum and the clock on the wall that had always been 7 minutes fast. I thought about calling a lawyer. I thought about calling my other daughter, the one in Portland, who I hadn't spoken to in a year. I thought about calling someone who could tell me what to do next. Instead, I folded the papers and put them in a drawer. Not because I was giving up, because I needed to think. Because I needed to understand what had happened before I could decide how to undo it. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange, muted way. Emma didn't call. I didn't call her. The house felt bigger without her visits, the silence thicker. I started going through files I hadn't touched in years. Bank statements, mortgage documents, insurance papers. I found the stack of late payment notices I'd hidden. 5 months, not 4. I'd been worse off than I remembered. But I'd never agreed to this. I found a lawyer through a woman at church. He was in his 60s, patient and methodical. He listened without interrupting while I explained what had happened. When I finished, he asked to see the paperwork. I handed him the deed transfer, the notarized signature, the documents that said I'd willingly given everything away. He studied them for a long time, then he looked up. "This signature isn't yours?" "No." "You're sure?" "I'm sure. Because if you did sign it and you just don't remember—" "I didn't sign it." He nodded slowly. "Then we have options. But it's going to be complicated and expensive, and it's going to take time." "How much time?" "Months, maybe longer. And there's no guarantee we'll win. If she can prove you were incapacitated and she acted in your best interest, a judge might side with her. She stole my house. She'll say she saved it, and she might be right. If you were going into foreclosure, she technically did prevent you from losing it. By taking it herself. By taking ownership, yes, but proving criminal intent is going to be hard, especially if there's any documentation showing you knew about the financial trouble." I thought about the unopened envelopes, the ignored phone calls, the months I'd spent pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. What if I can't prove she forged my signature? Then it becomes your word against a notarized document, and your word is compromised by the medications you were on. I left his office with a retainer agreement I couldn't afford and a sick feeling in my stomach that wouldn't go away. Emma called 2 weeks later. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me still wanted to hear her voice. Still wanted to believe there was an explanation that would make this make sense. "Mom, what do you want?" "I want to talk. Can I come over?" "No. Please, I need to explain." "You already did." "Not all of it." I closed my eyes. The house was dark except for the lamp in the living room. Outside, the trees were nearly bare, their branches skeletal against the gray sky. 5 minutes. She arrived 20 minutes later. This time she knocked instead of using her key. I let her in but didn't offer coffee. We stood in the hallway like strangers. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For not telling you everything up front. For making you feel like I betrayed you." "You did betray me. I was trying to help. By stealing my house." "I told you, I didn't steal it. I saved it, and I'm not keeping it. I was always going to transfer it back once you were stable." "When?" She hesitated. "When I knew you could handle it." "Handle what? My own house?" "Handle the responsibility. Mom, you almost lost everything. You were so far behind on payments that the bank was going to foreclose. I couldn't let that happen." "So you decided for me?" "Yes, because you couldn't decide for yourself." "You don't get to make that choice." Someone had to. We stared at each other across the narrow hallway. I could see the girl she'd been once, 8 years old, standing in the same spot, asking if she could paint her room purple. I'd said yes. I'd always said yes to her. Maybe that was the problem. "Are you going to transfer it back?" I asked. "Eventually." When is eventually? When I know you're okay. I'm okay now. Are you? The question hung between us, because the truth was, I didn't know. I was still recovering, still tired, still overwhelmed by the logistics of daily life, still behind on understanding what had happened while I'd been absent from my own existence. I want my house back, I said quietly. You'll get it back. I want it back now. I can't do that yet. Why not? Because the mortgage is in my name now. I'm the one making the payments. I'm the one who kept the bank from taking it. If I transfer it back and you fall behind again, we both lose. So you're keeping it. I'm protecting it. By owning it. Yes. She said it without apology, without shame, just a simple statement of fact. She believed she was right. She believed she'd saved me. And maybe, in some narrow, terrible way, she had. But the cost of salvation was everything I'd worked for, everything I'd thought was mine. Get out, I said again. This time she didn't argue. She turned and left. I watched through the window as her car pulled away, taillights disappearing around the corner. Then I locked the door and went upstairs to the bedroom I'd slept in for 38 years, in the house that was no longer mine. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in mid-November, soft and silent, covering the garden I'd stopped tending. I paid rent to my daughter now, though we never called it that. She called it contribution to expenses. I called it proof that I was living in my own house as a guest. The lawyer said we could fight it. He said we could argue coercion, fraud, undue influence. He said we might win, but he also said it would cost more than I had and take longer than I wanted and destroy whatever was left of my relationship with my daughter. He said these things gently, the way you tell someone their options when there are no good options left. I thought about my other daughter, the one in Portland. We'd spoken once since all this happened. I'd called her late one night when the house felt too quiet and the walls felt too close. I'd told her everything. She'd listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she'd been silent for a long time. I'm sorry, Mom, she'd finally said. It's not your fault. No, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not surprised. That hurt more than anything Emma had done, because it meant I'd been the only one who hadn't seen this coming. It meant everyone else had known what I'd refused to believe, that my daughter was capable of this, that she'd been moving toward it for years, collecting pieces of my life while I slept. Spring came, the garden bloomed without me. I'd stopped planting anything new. I wasn't sure I'd be here to see it grow. Emma came by less often, once a month maybe. She'd drop off groceries or fix something that had broken. We were polite to each other, careful. We talked about the weather, about her work, about anything that didn't require us to acknowledge what had happened. She never mentioned transferring the house back. I stopped asking. Some nights I walked through the rooms and tried to remember when they'd stopped feeling like mine. It hadn't happened all at once. It had been gradual, like water carving stone, imperceptible until the shape had changed completely. I'd lived here longer than I'd lived anywhere. I knew every creak in the floor, every stain on the ceiling, every place where the paint was chipped. But knowing a place isn't the same as owning it, and I'd learned the difference. The lawyer eventually told me the truth I'd already known. Fighting would cost more than I could win. The signature looked close enough, the documents were legal enough, my memory was compromised enough, and even if we proved she'd forged my name, she could argue she'd done it to save the house from foreclosure, which was technically true. A judge might rule in her favor. A judge might rule in mine. But either way, I'd spend everything I had left on a battle that would leave me with nothing but the satisfaction of being right. I let it go, not because I forgave her, because I was tired, because being right doesn't pay the mortgage, because sometimes the cost of justice is everything you have left to lose. I still live here. I still pay rent to my daughter for the house I bought, with money I earned cleaning floors. She still calls it contribution to expenses. I still call it proof that I was wrong about everything I thought I knew. Sometimes I see her and I remember the girl who held my hand during her father's funeral, the girl who stayed when her sister left, the girl who made me tea and bought me a stuffed elephant because she thought it would help me heal. Other times I see a stranger wearing my daughter's face, someone who learned to take what she wanted and call it love. Maybe both are true. Maybe people contain multitudes. Maybe betrayal and care can live in the same gesture, the same choice, the same careful signature at the bottom of a page. I don't know if I'll ever get the house back. I don't know if I want it anymore. Some days I think about moving, about starting over, somewhere smaller and simpler and mine. Other days I think about staying, just to spite her, just to prove I'm still here, still standing in the rooms I chose. But most days I don't think about it at all. I make coffee, I watch the morning light fall through the kitchen window at the same angle it always has. I keep the routine intact. Because if I keep moving forward, if I keep doing the small, ordinary things that make up a life, maybe eventually I'll stop feeling like a ghost in my own home. The papers are still in the drawer. I look at them sometimes late at night when the house is still and I can't sleep. My name isn't on them, my address is. And somewhere in the space between those two facts lives the truth I'm still learning to carry. Trust is a house you build with someone else's hands. And when they take it back, you're left standing in the cold, holding the keys to a door that no longer opens for you. But you keep standing, because standing is the only way to prove you're still here.